Trauma podcast. This is the biology behind it. I'm your host, Dr. Amy. And this week's episode, full length, was Helga Byrne, episode 118 of the Biology of Trauma podcast. And we discussed a topic that is rarely talked about, but is so common, how we as practitioners often navigate our own healing journey. We have challenges with our physical health, and we are trying to help other people and find ourselves challenged with juggling our own chronic illness while helping others. In the full length episode, Helga shared her decade long battle with chronic Lyme disease and not even knowing that it was chronic Lyme, and how that affected her therapy practice, and how that eventually led her to restructure her day, restructure her schedule in a way that could work for her to be able to have a living and also take care of her own health. In the episode, one concept that Helga mentioned that really resonated with many listeners was the spoon theory. Now, this is a framework for understanding limited energy, especially during chronic illness. And so today I wanted to dive deeper into the biology behind the spoon theory, and specifically even down to the cellular level, looking at mitochondria function and how that influences your energy bank account and what happens when that bank account gets depleted. Now, a question came in this week from Melissa, a therapist in Seattle, who posted on LinkedIn last week, and she says, Dr. Amy, I am really struggling to be able to keep up with my work, not because of the volume of the work, but because there are certain clients of mine that their stories are hard for me to hear. I find myself more drained after they leave my office than when other people leave my office. What do I do? How do I navigate being a therapist and being able to manage my own physical health reactions to their stories? I'm going to answer Melissa's question at the end of this short little episode, because let's talk about the science of mitochondria. When we talk about energy, we're really talking about mitochondria, because mitochondria are these remarkable organelles inside of our cells that make energy. They are the power plants, they are the factory houses. They take the food that we eat and the oxygen that we breathe and make that together into ATP. ATP is our body's energy currency, it's our energy money. How much ATP do you have? Because that's how much energy you have in your bank account. In my book, The Biology of Trauma, I explain how these energy factories are actually quite vulnerable to the effects of trauma. That's right. There is a stress response that amps up the mitochondria and energy production. And then when the body goes into trauma biology, it shuts these energy factories down. When our body gets caught in that stress and overwhelm loop because we haven't been resolving the trauma and our body's been holding it, that's when these effects can become chronic as well. Our mitochondria chronically have a hard time making energy and keeping up with what we need to do. And it can shift very easily because as we experience more overwhelm in our day, the vagus nerve is communicating to our cells to shut down. And so we can be experiencing the stress and the overwhelm and the upregulation of energy and the downregulation of energy all in the same day as a result of our nervous system shifting between these three states. And this is very challenging because as a practitioner or caregiver or parent, we need to be able to predict our energy levels. We need to be able to last throughout the day because we've got to give. And so to not be able to know that we are going to have the energy is also contributing to our stress. We stress about, am I going to have the energy? Or is this going to be a hard day, a hard afternoon where I'm going to have to rely on caffeine, on sugar, chocolate in order to get me through the day and then just go home and collapse? It's quite stressful to not be able to know that I am going to have the energy for what I need to do. And this is where burnout can happen very easily. But let's come back to the mitochondria because we want to talk about then this energy bank account and what can we do if this is where we are. Because when our body shifts into the overwhelm state or the trauma biology, Instead of producing energy efficiently through a process that we call oxidative phosphorylation, it switches to a backup system. And this backup system does require less oxygen, which is good because I don't know if you've noticed, but when we go into a trauma shutdown response, our breath becomes less. So we're taking in less oxygen. So our mitochondria switch to using less oxygen to make energy, but it's also very carbohydrate dependent. This is not when we're going to be able to stay in ketosis or use as many proteins for fuel. It's going to be based only on fast sugars, which is why we crave sugars in these times of overwhelm and I need fast energy. So, this is where in the longer episode, Helga was experiencing the crushing fatigue, where even standing up felt impossible. Maybe you've been in that place. I remember being in that place. I'm sitting at my desk, there's patients out in the waiting room, and it feels so hard to get up out of my chair. I really just want to curl up into a fetal position and make it all go away. This is when our body and specifically our mitochondria have gone into this shutdown place. And so that is where the repair and the solution lie for us, because this isn't just physical energy. This is the overwhelmed state of our body. Now, what's fascinating is that our brain cells become involved as well. And when our body crosses that critical line of overwhelm, then our brain immune cells get triggered, and now there's brain fog added to the fatigue. We can experience the brain fog, we can experience the decision fatigue. Everything feels hard to do. It feels hard to think and make decisions. We don't want to even make big decisions because we realize that our thinking is not at its best. And this is part of this trauma biology that goes into the what we have to navigate if we are experiencing our own chronic physical health issues and conditions as a practitioner. One of the words that I want to share with you that's happening here is called the cell danger response. And this is what is happening at the mitochondrial level, where because of the shift to overwhelm, our mitochondria are going to literally shut down and fall apart. This is research coming out of San Diego University. Bob Navio, if you want to look up his research, cell danger response. And it is the ultimate trauma biology behind the fatigue that comes with overwhelm. And of course, part of the problem is that this becomes a chronic state, not just a temporary feeling. When we are in a trauma experience, it becomes chronic as our body has held on to the pain, the fear, and the overwhelm from past experiences. What does this have to do with spoon theory? So Helga mentioned the spoon theory. This was originally created by Christine Misserandino to explain invisible, the idea that we only have so much energy per day and we only have so many spoons. And so spoons representing that energy. What's in your bank account? How many spoons do you have? Maybe just 12 spoons. And how are you going to choose how to use those 12 spoons? Because once you've used them up, you don't have any more. And that is one of the key concepts that I want you to walk away from the longer episode with Helga. Once you use up your energy, once you use up your spoons, you don't get any more that day. And so when I realized that I was running out of spoons by mid morning, and then the rest of the day was just awful. And I actually was making a lot of bad decisions the rest of the day because I was out of spoons. I started to restructure my day differently so that knowing that I would otherwise run out of spoons earlier in the day, I needed to be very selective about how do I use my energy. One of the questions that I started to ask myself is around stress. And does this deserve my stress response? Does this thing that's taking my energy because it's so stressful, does it deserve my stress response? Because if not, I'm going to intentionally and choose to not care because I don't want to use my spoon for that. I want to save my spoon for something that really matters to me, something that's personal to me, something that's significant to me, something that's meaningful to me. So it allowed me to start to choose how I was going to use my energy rather than just letting life happen to me. And I would find myself back in that overwhelmed place and having run out of spoons. But then, of course, we don't want to just stay with the same amount of spoons. The idea, just like with Helga, the idea is to find the root of the illness, the physical health symptoms that we're having, so that we can change. That this is not the way that the rest of our life is. And so, how do we do that discovery process? And for Helga, it was a decade-long discovery process. Maybe you can relate. Maybe you've had an issue where you've been to several practitioners, felt like you've gone to the bottom of the barrel and still haven't had answers. That happened to me as well, where I was starting to experience more fatigue and burnout, and I didn't have any answers. Even as a physician, I didn't have any answers. And things had to get really bad for me to be able to stop and say, I need to figure this out because my life cannot continue this way. It had become unbearable. And so, as we look at how to recognize our energy expenditure, how to choose our energy expenditure, it really comes down to some of the trauma patterns that I share in my book. There are 5 trauma patterns that I see emerge from my work and study with trauma. And 3 of these directly impact our energy: depletion, disruption, and dysregulation. And so when my body is in a trauma response, that is what I will feel. I will feel depleted. I will feel that my movement is disrupted and my nervous system is dysregulated. And that is when I know I've crossed that critical line of overwhelm and I need to guard and protect myself for the rest of that day until I can rest, recover, and reset. At that point, there's nothing that I can do to get more spoons. I've run out of spoons. And then being able to recognize as we're approaching that line. So, can I recognize when I'm approaching depletion? Can I recognize when I'm approaching dysregulation? Because that is when I can start to interrupt those patterns and stay out of overwhelm. So, coming back to Melissa's question as we close, Melissa, what can you actually do about being able to predict your energy levels and to manage these fluctuating energy levels and low energy, even as a practitioner? We are going to want to create some resource boundaries, whether that be time boundaries, energy boundaries, boundaries around what you'll allow yourself to stress out about. So, those are boundaries that will allow you to choose how to use your spoons. Prioritizing what are those things that are most important to you. Maybe coming back to the age old to do list. What are the top 3 things that are the most important things that you want to do today for your life? And you prioritize those. If nothing else gets done, that's okay because you've identified the 3 most important things for you to do. And then you can make sure to allocate spoons to that and not get to the end of the day and realize that once again, you've spent all your spoons on all these other people, places, and things and not left any for yourself and what's important to you. One of the things that I would want you to reserve a spoon for is your own repair of your mitochondria. So, if the mitochondria are shutting down, if the mitochondria are not making efficient energy anymore in the state of the shutdown, well, then what can we do to repair that? Because until we repair that, the same pattern will continue. If nothing changes, nothing changes. So, how can we bring in repair? In my book, I call these the biology trauma repair tools because they are tools. So, Melissa, this will be something that you can really lean into as well. What are the biology repair tools that you can use to be repairing your mitochondria and even that brain inflammation for being able to have better energy production and more efficiently, more consistently? How do we support our mitochondria? There are a number of ways. I am going to just list out a few here, but there are a number of ways. And we would want to start with the nutrients. Do your mitochondria have the nutrients that they need? In order to make energy, they need magnesium, they need B vitamins, they need CoQ10. These are the things that they need in order to make energy. And it is not surprising to me that magnesium deficiency is one of the most common deficiencies in the Western world today. Magnesium is used up more when we're under stress. And so here we have created a deficiency in magnesium that leads to then this inefficiency in energy production. We reach our capacity sooner and we're running out of spoons. The brain inflammation. I have a link for my brain inflammation protocol in the show notes because the brain inflammation will be another thing that takes more spoons away from your day than what you could have. When you wake up and you feel that brain fog and the decision fatigue and maybe the light sensitivity as a result of brain inflammation, you can know that you have fewer spoons that day than otherwise. And so, how do we repair that brain inflammation? In the show notes, I have the specific nutrients that are targeting brain inflammation. Things like magnesium trionate, a specific form of magnesium. Things like huperzine. This is another nutrient. Luteolin A. These are nutrients that are targeting brain inflammation, calming that fire down, and ultimately allowing you to have more spoons in your day because you don't have the brain inflammation draining your energy. So with that, that's where I would want you to start, Melissa. That's go find some of those supplements, start repairing your biology, as well as putting in place some of the energetic boundaries, time boundaries, and other boundaries around stress that will take away your spoons more than what you would want to choose and allow. For a deeper explanation and exploration of these concepts, I invite you back to listen to the full episode with Helga Byrne, episode 118 of the Biology of Trauma podcast. Thank you for joining me here for this mini episode. I look forward to hearing from you. Please post your questions. You can find me on LinkedIn as well and post your questions. And I look forward to hearing what you are doing to navigate your chronic health symptoms, even as being a practitioner and a professional caregiver or parent helping someone else with theirs.